And then, of course, we've been in this series now for the last bunch of weeks, kind of since Easter. We jumped in and we said, hey, we're going to spend some time looking at kind of how God works in our lives, how he tends to work, period. And this one's called From Graves into Gardens. And we're looking a lot at how God takes something, often into death, in order to bring new life out of it. And we saw that in the life of Jesus, that Jesus would offer himself, offer his life, and move towards death in order to be resurrected and to offer us new life today. And we said that's kind of how he works all the time. He's often working that way in us. And for those of us who said, hey, I want to follow Jesus, we've experienced that in a degree, that there's a reality that we've kind of said goodbye to our old life. There's a death that happens, and now we have a new life, and we're trying to live in that new life, live in the garden, saying goodbye to the grave is kind of the idea. And so if you've been tracking with us, you kind of know that line of thought. If you've missed any of these conversations, you can catch up online if you want through our YouTube channel. It's a great way to just kind of stay up to speed of the teaching if you want to catch up more there. And what I want to do today, though, as we kind of continue to advance the series and the conversation, is we're going to take some time and really look at what does this look like when it comes to our words, to our language, that there's a reality that there's a version of our presentation of ourselves, our communication, how we talk, how we are with each other, how we present ourselves, that can look a lot like death. And there's a version that can look a lot like life. And I want us to see the value and kind of how important it is that we understand how this principle works in our presentation of ourselves, our language, our communication, and how we kind of talk to each other and present ourselves to the world. And we're going to see this show up right away. I want to introduce you to a proverb here in Proverbs 18:21. And the writer of Proverbs says this. He says, life and death are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat its fruits. And so right away, right, the writer of Proverbs is pointing to this. He's saying, hey, that the same thing, right, the same tongue can produce this death, and it can also produce this life. What's he talking about? So let's kind of dive into it a little bit. I want to see this, right, that my words and what comes out of my mouth, and by extension, don't just think of my words as what I say out loud. My text message, my email, my communication, what I present and what kind of comes out of me can look a lot like life. It can bring life to people. It can bring hope and encouragement and support. It can show up and undergird people. It sometimes can bring so much that it's actually one of those things that kind of anchors into our hearts and lives and changes us forever. The same tongue, right, the same words, the same communication can look, of course, like death. And I bet that if we had the time to dive into it together, that if we kind of excavated our stories with each other and looked into it, I bet you we could go back and within minutes, I bet you we could find words and communication that has come into our lives that has been damaging to us, that has been death to us. People that have spoken and said, you'll never amount to anything, and you're an idiot, and called names, or people that we trusted that anchored words into us, and those things might have happened this week. They might have happened 25, 30, 50 years ago. But regardless, that's the power of the tongue, right? It's the power of our communication. It has that kind of ability to bring death and destruction and harm. It's a serious thing we're talking about. At the same time, if we had time, I bet we could dive in and understand and look and see that there are moments where people have been used to bring life to us. We probably have fork in the road moments, and somebody showed up and they spoke something into our lives. And they said they saw something in us, or they said something, and that went into us so deeply that it changed us forever. Right? And I would be able to have those, and I bet you would have them too. I remember moments when people said things to me that were so harmful and made me think, well, will I ever move past these damaging pieces of my life? I remember in 7th grade when my teacher said something encouraging to me in front of the whole class. I'll never forget it, right? happened, and it blew my mind. And I bet all of us have those. Even this week, there was a side comment that ran past when I was in an interaction with somebody, and that side comment bounced around in my mind, and I thought, why did they say that? Right? And it created a moment of insecurity, and it brought some death. At the same time, there a few weeks ago, a friend of mine sent a text to me that was super encouraging, and I thought about that text for days and days after, and I was like, I needed that. That brought life to me. Right? We start to see it. The power of life and death are in the tongue. So this thing is a big, big deal. Let me just give you one more, and then we'll start to dive into kind of the root system of this. In 12:18, he says, the words of the reckless pierce like swords, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. It is the life-giving, right? The tongue of the wise that's going to speak into and help people find forgiveness and healing and a salve for their soul. The wise bring that. Those who take the power of the tongue and anchor it into life. At the same time, the reckless, right? Their words are like swords. They pierce. You ever talk to somebody and you know that you're going to get that random side comment? It's just coming, right? There's just somebody. Everybody has this person. I don't know how this happens, but there's always somebody in our lives that there's a random passive-aggressive side comment. It's a zinger. It's going to be a dagger to the soul, and you're like, I just know it's coming. Wait for it, and then it comes. Right? We all know what we're talking about. They're swords. They're reckless. When we went into premarital counseling, and Laura and I were getting married, one of the best pieces of advice I got, we asked a bunch of people for marital advice as we went in, and one of the things somebody said to us was this. They said, don't be reckless with one another. Don't be reckless. Be careful. Hold each other delicately. And when it comes to our words, this stuff starts to matter enormously. Our friendships. That when I just throw stuff out there that's coming out of my mind or my heart, I can accidentally slice people. I can pierce people with the recklessness of words. Now, let's dive into it a little bit. I want to see where this all comes from, because there's going to be a source to all this. And if we want to get out of the grave and move into the garden more and more, we need to understand kind of what's underneath it. So here's what Jesus would say. Matthew 12:33 and 34, he's talking to a group of religious leaders. He's frustrated with them in the conversation in this context. He says, make a tree good and its fruit will be good. Make a tree bad and its fruit will be bad, for a tree is recognized by its fruit. And then he calls them a brood of vipers, which I think is super interesting. I just would love to see that happen, right? You just imagine Jesus saying, you brood of vipers, right? It's pretty bad if the Son of God, who never sinned, can say this. He says, you brood of vipers, how can you who are evil say anything good? And then here's the key piece. For the mouth speaks what the heart is full of. And Jesus is pointing to a principle here that is really important for us to understand. He's saying it's not just like randomness. That's a terrible heart, right? It's not just randomness that comes out of our heart. You can make fun. It's okay. I do too, right? It's not just randomness that comes out here. It's going to come out of our heart. It's the overflow of our heart that the mouth speaks. And we know, right, because we've been looking at this over the last bunch of weeks, that if I'm a follower of Jesus, I've been rescued and I've been saved from death, and that there's a part of me that is still being saved, right? Have I been rescued by Jesus because he died? Absolutely. And there's a reality, I still got to live in this body and live with myself. And so I know that some of what comes out of me is still going to continue to be this ugly death that ends up showing up. On the other side of the equation is the great news that out of the heart, because Jesus has given me a new heart, now newness can come out more and more in frequency, because now he is born within me this new set of desires, and that wants to bring life and hope and help to people. But I want to understand that here's the source of it. It comes out of the heart. It comes out of the heart. And this is the tricky part, is our hearts are ever exposing themselves through our words. It's the reality. I don't just randomly say stuff, although sometimes it feels that way. It's out of my heart and the overflow of my heart that my mouth is speaking. And sometimes that looks really ugly. That's true in my life. Sometimes that's really helpful. Let's understand a little bit deeper how this works. But I want to go down and say, if I'm going to change my words, I can't just start at the word level. I got to look down at the heart level and understand that my heart needs to continue to change and become more and more like Christ if it's going to show up differently in my words. Here's what Paul would say in Ephesians chapter 4. He says, therefore, each of you must put off falsehood and speak truthfully to your neighbor. He says, for we're all members of one body. In your anger, do not sin. Do not let the sun go down while you're still angry. And do not give the devil a foothold, he says. This is a fascinating passage, right? But Paul's going to lean into this, and he says, here's what I want to do. I want to put off death, falsehood, and lies, and I want to speak truth, right, to my neighbor. I want to lean into that and bring life. And then he says, in your anger, don't sin. Don't let the sun go down while you're still angry. Here's the reality is that my motives are going to show up here, right? It's out of my heart and out of my motivation that there's two different kinds of motives that are going to play out. One that is going to exercise itself in death. One that's going to exercise itself in truth. And really, this one looks a lot like this, that it's going to move towards a place of harm where it's out of frustration or anger or sometimes even jealousy, that the words that I say that look like death, they come from. This is what Paul's going to drive at. He says, don't do that. Help each other. You want your words to build one another up, to benefit each other, speak to each other truthfully. That doesn't mean that everything that we say at all times is going to feel good, but the motivation is to help. Guys, this is a big deal. This is a big deal. Here's the thing, and here's why I want us to make sure we get a hold of this. If you've ever thought in your life about being used powerfully in the world, you ever thought, man, I wish my life could matter. I wish I could have a big impact on the world. And maybe if you're like me, maybe you've even thought at times, if I had a situation like so-and-so, then I could impact the world. I could make change. I could alter things. And here's what the reality of the Bible is saying is, he's saying every single day that I'm alive, I have the option on the table where I have the choice of whether I'm going to look at the people around me and say, I'm going to bring help and truth and life to you. I'm going to bring benefit to you. I'm going to speak truthfully to you, or I'm going to be damaging to you and bring harm to you. I'm going to look at what you have, and because you have something that I want to have, I'm going to slander you. And here's the thing, guys. We see this and we experience this all the time. This is everywhere. The kind of language that would naturally pop out of our lives, right, in our culture and even in us, often is not super positive and life-giving. The natural thing to do is to slander or to tear down. And what I want us to recognize is this. Every day, I can show up and bring help that literally could help sustain someone. I could send an encouraging text or pop in and look and begin to speak some truth to somebody. And maybe that just keeps them going another day. Maybe it's a life-changing thing like you and I have where we remember it for decades. But daily, that option is on the table. And what Paul's getting at here is hey, we're made new, and the opportunity to bring help and truth and life to people is unbelievable. Nothing has to change. I literally have that on the table every single day. Well, Ryan, if everything was different, man, if I had all these opportunities and platforms, then I could make a difference. The difference is it's right here. It's literally what comes out of my mouth. It's what I don't post often on social media, right? It's all this. Here's the reality is it's out of the overflow of the heart that this stuff happens. Let's keep unpacking it. Here's what Paul's going to say a little bit later in the passage. He says, don't let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. See, the motivation here is love. He says, don't let anything that's unwholesome or corrupt come out of your mouth. It's not who you are. It's not who you've been made to be. If you're a follower of Jesus, you've been made into a child of God. He says you have the opportunity to build each other up in love. Guys, I want to talk to this. This is a big deal. If you're here and you're a follower of Jesus, this is an important piece that I want to make sure we grab hold of. Not here, but in another environment, I found out about a new follower of Christ, just gave their life to Jesus, and they began to be connected into a group of followers of Jesus. And as they got connected into this group of followers of Jesus, they were just getting a whiff of what life felt like, right? They just moved from the grave to the garden. And the hope is, man, I'm going to connect in here and be a part of God's people, and it's going to be awesome. I'm going to be surrounded by other people trying to do the same thing as I did. They got into the group, and you know what happened? That group of people was so slanderous about the people who weren't there that this brand new follower of Jesus said, I don't want to have anything to do with that. It smells like death to me. Guys, this is a big deal. How we are and how we speak about one another, how we speak to each other, it's indicative of where our heart is. That's why it matters. It shows the world what I'm really about. If you're a follower of Jesus, right? This is huge. If you're not a follower of Jesus, you're investigating Christ today. Let me just say this. I've done this I've said this multiple times. I'm sorry if what you experienced when you interacted with followers of Jesus was more death than life. I want you to know that that's not how it's supposed to be. That when God spoke to you and I, He was speaking from the heart position of love and benefit and help. Doesn't mean that everything He said felt good, but that's the motive, that's the driver. And if what you experienced was death, I just want you to know that's not the heart of Jesus. Okay, I want you guys to hear me. I don't know if you know this or not, but this year we're going into an election season. Did you know that? This is one area of life, I realize that. It's an area of life that if we're not careful, follow me. As we get all revved up about political things, political angst, our ideas about things, what can happen very easily is our public display and our public opinions that are presented can diminish or sometimes even disqualify our ability to bring truth and life and influence to the people around us. I don't want to be so loud over here, spewing negativity or slandering or whatever that message is, that when it comes to my ability to bring encouragement and truth, I've lost my credibility over here. Okay, that doesn't happen just in politics. That can happen all over the place. It just happens to be an election year. Can you have opinion? Absolutely. Can you discuss things in a respectful, humble, honest way? Absolutely. It's not just our words or our posts or our texts or that are on display. It's our heart that's on display. We want that heart to match the heart of Jesus. And here's what Paul would say, right, in 4:30. He says, do not grieve the Holy Spirit of God, with whom you were sealed for the day of redemption. Here's what Paul's saying. He's saying, when you sit in a room and you tear down your brother or sister, when you speak ill of them, and you think it's just you, when you talk about that family member who everybody talks about, when you lie, when you gossip, when you speak evil, he's like, you're not doing that in secret, Christ follower. The Spirit of God is living within you, and he's witnessing you bring death into a situation. And he says, that grieves me. That grieves the Spirit of God. That grieves God himself. His words are huge. And listen, hear me. We're always going to wrestle with this. We're always going to struggle with it. James would say, anybody who can control their tongue is a perfect person. But I want to be aware of it. I want to be attuned to it. I want to understand the impact that's happening from right here. While I might steer clear of other areas of life that I know are destructive, this one can get sneaky on me, and it can show up, and it can do great harm. Here's what Paul would continue with. Get rid of all bitterness, rage, and anger, brawling and slander, along with every form of malice or hate is the idea. Be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other, just as in Christ God forgave you. Paul would say, hey, all that bitterness, that rage, that's dead. That's dead. Get rid of it. Right? Let it go. And lean in and choose to see from the heart, through the lens of love, the people around you, even people that are enemies towards you, even people that bring death to you. You don't have to bring death back. You can make a decision to bring life into a situation where death is coming at you. Jesus would look and say, love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you. Well, I don't like them. They're going to destroy me. I have a decision to make. Am I a death bringer or a life bringer? At the end of the day, that's what I want to wrestle with. I want to grab hold of. What am I bringing? What's coming out of my mouth and my life? That passive-aggressive side comment, that outburst of rage, that road rage moment, guys, that stuff is coming from somewhere. It's coming from undealt with, unrecognized areas where forgiveness issues need to be processed. And I would argue this, that if I'm living over here, right, more and more, I'm gonna lose joy. I'm gonna lose peace. I'm not gonna be marked by love. This area it ends up destroying and diminishing people, tears them down. All the while, I have the same opportunity to build up, to build into, to move people forward in a way that is powerful and life-giving. You say, Ryan, what do we do with this? Let me give you a couple places to start, a couple practical handles for this. There's a set of words that I think we could say, if I meant them from the heart, that have the power to just change the game, and they're not rocket science, they're not complicated. Okay, let me give you a few. If you're taking notes, write them down. If you are in any kind of set of committed relationships like friendship or a long-term relationship at work or a marriage or you have kids or whatever it is, saying these words almost has to be a part of our vocabulary at some point. Because I'm a broken, fallen person, I'm going to have to say the words, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Here's my guess. Right? My guess is that some of us are in the room right now and we're in a relationship that's in a stalemate. We're not talking. We're not interacting. There's tension. It's stuck. They did some stuff wrong, and if I was really honest, I did some stuff wrong, and it's stuck. Because it's not all your fault, and it's not all their fault. How does it get broken? How do you break through the stalemate? Somebody has to make a decision to say, I'm going to speak the truth here. I'm going to say, I'm sorry. I did this wrong. Right? And as soon as you do that, it has the potential, it's not a guarantee, some things are complicated, it has the potential to break that stalemate, to soften it. It'll follow up with the next one. Here's the next extension of that. Please forgive me. Please forgive me. If you're in a relational conflict and you did 10% of the wrong, they did 90%, you're still responsible for your 10%. So am I. Please forgive me. You asking for forgiveness does not negate their 90%. It's just you taking ownership for your 10. As a parent, I've had to ask for forgiveness from my kids and say I'm sorry multiple times. Guys, I'm sorry. I was more harsh than I wanted to be in that moment. Will you forgive me? I've had to ask Lori, my wife. We've been married 22 years, I think. That's right. Yeah. Right? We've been married a long time. Please forgive me. Why? She lives with an imperfect person. I mess it up. How could I not need to say that? Okay, here's a big one. If you are in a close relationship, deep friendship, parent-child relationship, romantic relationship, looking someone in the eye and saying, I love you. I love you. I'm for you. Right? So some of us were raised, dads, we were raised and told not to say it. I told her once. I told her I love her. I said it at the altar. That's enough. It'll hold. Right? Some of us are raised that way. Hey, listen. Guys, listen. It leaks. It leaks. She needs to hear it again. Look her in the eye and say it. I feel awkward. I know, right? Just do it. Doesn't feel natural. So what? Move into it. I love you. Dad, you got a boy, your son? I don't care if he's 40 years old. You haven't told him you love him? Look him in the eye and tell him you love your boy. You got daughters? Tell them they're beautiful. You love them. Speak it. You have the opportunity to impart life. Fathers, mothers, speak it. I know they don't clean their room. Right? I know they mess it up. They're going to mess it. Your spouse messed it up. Tell them anyway. Tell her anyway. Well, it's not fixed yet. Do it. Speak life. Speaking life doesn't negate the rest of the problem. Here's what I would argue. It just steers you into the solution. You want more? What you celebrate, you get more of. You get what you celebrate. Say it. Speak it. I love you. Here's another one. Say thank you. Thank you. Say thank you. Thank you to your parents. Thank you to the person that contributed. Say, I feel humble and I feel vulnerable when I do that. What if they try to take advantage? Say it anyway. Thank you. Here's another one. Say, I'm with you. Sometimes, guys, we're in situations and people in our lives are in situations that there's no real words for. Like there's nothing that you can say. Nothing's going to fix it. And literally just saying, looking and sitting next to somebody or standing with somebody and saying, I'm here. I'm here. That's it. Our presence and our words, and our communication. Guys, it's the extension of the heart of Jesus. And here's what I want you to know. A bunch of us gave up on trying to make an impact a long time ago. A bunch of us did. Our dreams died. We're just trying to stay kind of comfortable, away from pain and towards a little bit of comfort. And I would submit to you, and I will submit to you as long as I am in this role, that you are made for far more than that. That you are here on this planet to be a life giver and life speaker, that the help and the encouragement that you can bring. Taking a moment and texting that person. Guys, the people around us, they are tired. You are tired. When somebody out of nowhere shows up and gives you encouragement, how do you feel about that? It's a game changer. It doesn't happen very often, I know. So when you do it, when you think, man, I wish somebody would encourage me, you encourage them. Do it, right? Press into the moments where you can offer help in life, and what you see that is good, you should say out loud. Every single day of our lives, we are communicating. We are offering life or death. Here's the question. Can it be said of me that the people around me are gaining life from my presence and from my words? Or are the people around me catching death and poison and toxicity from my words and my communication? And here's the thing, right? We're a mixed bag, I realize. I'm not talking about perfection. But is the trend of my life this way, where I'm here to help and I'm here to speak truth? I would argue that the stakes are very high. And that while we may never have a massive platform, we may never have a fame that reaches thousands in a moment, that the handful of people around us, they will impact people who will impact the handful of people around them, who impact the handful of people around them, and life is multiplied through you. Here's the challenge. May it be said of us that the death and the damaging kind of communication that comes out of us is lessened so that this can explode. I don't want to spend my credibility over here. I don't want to be reckless and just throw communication out because there's a button that says post or reshare. That because somebody said it to me and they complained to me, I can complain on. I don't want to diminish my influence by jumping in on the death. It's a game changer. Absolute game changer. You want to know what spiritual maturity looks like? It's not knowing the Greek. And it's not knowing every piece of information in the Bible, although I would highly encourage us to spend time there. Spiritual maturity looks like a heart that looks more and more like Jesus. and a mouth that sounds more and more like Jesus, with eyes that are fixated on bringing help and hope where it's hard to find, to being salt and light in a situation where there's darkness, when everybody else is saying damaging things. I'm respectfully, kindly, non-condescendingly showing up and finding a way to bring truth into a situation. Guys, as the band comes up, I'd love for us to just give ourselves a little bit of space on this one. To really ask and reflect, what's coming out of me right now? What's coming out of me? Is it the grave? Is it the garden? We ask the Lord to help us to move this way more and more, even now. Would you bow your heads and close your eyes? Band will come out. Father, we just need you for this. God, in our relationships, our friendships, our families, Lord, you are asking us and inviting us, giving us the great privilege and the great responsibility of being a life giver. God, we want to own and confess that we have brought death. God, sometimes unintentionally, sometimes on purpose, Lord. Forgive us. And we know that your grace is great, that you forgive completely, and that you want to move in our hearts more and more to bring the hope and the truth and the encouragement and the life that you long for us to have. We get to bring that to others. God, help us with us, even now.